السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله الذي أرسل رسوله بالهدى ودين الحق ليظهره على الدين كله وكفى بالله شهيدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد. As to what proceeds, once again we meet for our 8th lesson with regards to studying the book Bulugh al-Maram by al-Hafiz ibn Ḥajar رحمه ta'ala, the book of fasting, Kitab al-Siyam, and the hadith is the third hadith of the book, Hadith of Ibn Umar radiyallahu anhuma, with regards to when to start fasting and when to celebrate Eid. In our previous meeting we were discussing the fiasco and the history with regards to the moon sighting of the UK. The issue which was under discussion was the 19th issue, which is the Deobandi fiasco and internal fighting. Now, and one of the students reminded me that regarding the brother who said that Bosnia was the closest Muslim country. So at the time when these moon sighting committees were established, at the time Bosnia was a federal state ruled by the Socialist Federation Republic of Yugoslavia, and it only became a country in the 1990s. The republic's inhabitants were majority Eastern Orthodox Christian, whereas the government itself was a secular socialist. Deobandi fiasco and internal fighting. Now, and one of the students reminded me that regarding the brother who said that Bosnia was the closest Muslim country. So at the time when these moon sighting committees were established, at the time Bosnia was a federal state ruled by the Socialist Federation Republic of Yugoslavia, and it only became a country in the 1990s. The republic's inhabitants were majority Eastern Orthodox Christian, whereas the government itself was a secular socialist communist and very atheistic. They, along with the Soviet Union, ruled over the rest of the Muslim regions in Eastern Europe. So therefore the Muslims, they were also a minority, just like the Muslims in England, which could have been a reason for why they followed Morocco instead. So this is what one of the students also commented with regards to Bosnia. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. But that which seems to be correct is Morocco or Saudi Arabia. So just going back to our issue, because we want to finish the issue today, with regards to the Deobandi fiasco and internal fighting, because they play an important role when it comes to the unity of the Muslims in the UK. I discussed and I clarified for you the position of the Barelvis. The Barelvis consider the Salafis and the Ahlul Hadith to be disbelievers. In fact, the Barelvis consider everybody to be a disbeliever who is not a Barelvi. The Deobandis started fighting amongst each other, and then their very first organization for the sighting of the moon was set up in 1966, known as Majlis al-Ulama Britain. And then they changed the name to Jamiyatul Ulama Britain in 1971. So this is the first moon sighting committee that was set up. But because of their differing internal differences, another organization was set up rivalry to them, known as Hizbul Ulama. In addition to this, an organization by the name of Institute of Islamic Jurisprudence in Batley also set up an independent moon sighting committee known as Batley Moon Sighting Committee, which is led by Yusuf Sacha. So you have these bodies of moon sighting committees that have been set up in the UK by the Deobandis upon the Deobandi principles, and from amongst them, Hizbul Ulama follow Saudi Arabia, and the others split and differ. So we know that Yusuf Sacha, who runs the Institute of Islamic Jurisprudence and who is the head of the Moon Sighting Committee of Batley, they call it Batley, which is next to Dewsbury. But as we know that the headquarters of the Tablighi Jamaat in Dewsbury still follow Saudi Arabia, due to the 28th of December 1986 agreement amongst the Deobandis, when all these bodies met, all these committees of moon sighting met at the first Darul Ulum that was established in Europe by the Deobandis, known as Darul Ulum Bury in UK in Ramsbottom. Yusuf Sacha and others were all in agreement of following Saudi Arabia. So one thing that must be noted is that in the history of the Deobandis, mostly over 95% of the Deobandis have all followed Saudi Arabia. After 1986 till 2020, because of the animosity and hatred and enmity towards the Salafi da'wah, we find that the Deobandis, many of their scholars, they started changing their positions with the fake notion of Saudi Arabia don't sight the moon. The sighting of the moon is based upon astronomical calculations. Therefore, we're no longer going to follow Saudi Arabia. But most of the Deobandis of the UK still, in majority, follow Saudi Arabia. Those who oppose following Saudi Arabia, they are still a minority. Are the students following what I'm saying? So I'm going to read once again a few passages, because we have to rush in our previous lesson. So I'm going to read with regards to the issue on moon sighting in Britain. The Muslims of Britain are well aware of the fact that due to the weather in Britain being overcast, it becomes difficult to determine the beginning of the month of Ramadan, as well as the two Eids. 40 years ago, the Muslims of Britain were involved in a sort of tug of war, wherein some followed the sighting of Pakistan, while others followed that of Morocco or Saudi Arabia. Some would follow any other Muslim country, and yet some would follow the sighting of just any country. The differences kept getting deeper, and the Muslims of Britain had become the victims of confusion and anxiety. In order to overcome these differences, our ulama, meaning the Deobandis, had sought fatwa from the muftis and learned scholarly elders. Then, in conformance to their advice, we adopted the sighting of the nearest Muslim country, Morocco. The majority of scholars, as well as the general Muslim public, were in favor of this decision, and the sighting of Morocco was adopted for 12 years. Despite this, a fair number of ulama, as well as some Muslim organizations, still adopted the sighting of Morocco. In this manner, our affiliate ulama differed on the issue of the sighting of the moon, and this gave rise to another organization known as Hizbul Ulama UK. The other prominent body was Jamiatul Ulama Britain. The Jamiatul Ulama Britain stopped accepting the sighting from Morocco and resolved to seek the sighting of the moon based on the possibility forecasted by the Weather Bureau, and if due to cloud cover the moon is not seen, then the news of sighting of the moon would be accepted from any country declaring to have sighted it. The Jamiatul Ulama Britain had adopted this resolution, but the general public was uneasy about it. Hizbul Ulama UK had adopted the sighting of the moon from Morocco for approximately 20 years. However, in 1986, when they sent a fax with an Eid greeting at 11 a.m., the senior members of Hizbul Ulama UK also fell into dispute. Some of them rejected the sighting of Morocco and completed their 30th fast, while the rest broke their fast, and due to it being too late to hold Eid Salah that day, they had it the next day. In this manner, doubt and suspicion was raised regarding the declaration from Morocco and caused a division amongst those who had previously accepted the sighting of Morocco. Amidst this confusion, the senior members of Hizbul Ulama UK felt it necessary to once again communicate with the honored muftis. So from this we understand that they were following Morocco. The Deobandis were following Morocco, and they followed Morocco for 20 years. After following Morocco, as we know that the position of the Deobandis is to follow international moon sighting. And that means that anywhere in the world, if the moon is sighted, they will accept the news if they're not able to see the moon themselves, and will start fasting. So when they differed amongst themselves with regards to Morocco, so Morocco at first was followed, and then it became a dispute amongst them. Their own very own organization, Hizbul Ulama, their scholars who are part of this organization differed, and they disputed with regards to that scenario which happened, that they received the news at 11 a.m. Some completed their fast and did not break their fast, and prayed Eid Salah the next day and celebrated the Eid the next day by completing 30. And some broke their fast, celebrated Eid that day, and they prayed their Eid Salah the next day qada'an. So Morocco became an issue of dispute amongst themselves. Are we understanding what happened? So this is the first thing we need to understand, that the Deobandis were following Morocco. Due to some reason, they felt uncomfortable with regards to the khabar that came from Morocco. After that, what they did is that they decided to write to their muftis, and so they posed questions to their muftis all around, mainly in India. And the answers that they got from their muftis, I will read about one or two of them. This is the mufti known as Mufti Yahya, and he is the chief mufti of Mazahir al-Ulum Saharanpur, which is considered to be the second most top madrasa of Deoband after Deoband itself. Mufti Yahya, in 1986, when this question was sent to him, he said, it will be permissible for you to adopt the sighting of Saudi Arabia, since they are very particular on the sighting of the moon, as has been established from Maulana Abdullah Abbas Nadwi. Now, Abdullah Abbas Nadwi was a Deobandi that used to teach Arabic at al-Qura University. I met him in India when I myself was a Deobandi in 1994-95. I actually met him in Nadwatul Ulama in Lucknow. He taught Arabic language for many years in al-Qura University. He was, you can say, not a staunch Deobandi, but he was an open-minded type of a Deobandi. So they wrote to him, asking him that you live in Saudi Arabia, can you tell us whether Saudi Arabia resort to astronomical calculations or whether they follow the Sharia way? He wrote back to them, as we shall see, and gave them a detailed answer. And he said, look, whoever is saying that Saudi Arabia follow astronomical calculations, then they're talking nonsense. Saudi Arabia don't follow al-Qura observatory. I teach in al-Qura. Saudi Arabia, they follow the moon sighted. They have a procedure, they have a judiciary, you have to come and you have to give a testimony, it's passed to the chief judge, the Qadi sends it to the king then approves it, and then it's officially announced that it's Eid or Ramadan. So this Mufti is saying that by accepting the sighting from Saudi Arabia, you won't have the problem of having every month of Ramadan consisting of 28 or 31 days. Likewise, you won't have the problem of having it 29 days every year due to not fixing a country to follow. This is what we call at-tadīq. Remember, we studied the masala of at-tadīq according to the Hanabila, of making every single month 29. Do you recall this? Do the students recall the masala of at-tadīq? Nah. So he said, likewise, you won't have the problem of having it 29 years every year due to not fixing a country to follow. There is no fear of the Muslims of England dividing into two groups, but rather a strong hope that all the Muslims of England will unanimously adopt the sighting of Saudi Arabia, and a declaration of any sighting can very easily be accessed. There won't be any difficulty as experienced with the announcements from Morocco. So one of the reasons that they decided to abandon following Morocco, they found a difficulty. Based on these reasons, my humble opinion is that you adopt the sighting of Saudi Arabia. So we have another Mufti known as Hazrat Mufti, what they call Ahmad Khanpuri, in Jamia Islamia Ta'limuddin, Dabel, Gujarat. This is considered to be the Deoband of Gujarat. This is where I studied for 5 years. This is the same Mufti that got me expelled from this institution when I became a Salafi. He's the one that gave the order that I should be expelled because of becoming a Salafi. He says, again in 1987, the 2nd of Jamadul Ula 1407, which is in 1987. According to the opinion of Imam Abu Hanifa, the difference of horizon should not be considered in the sighting of the moon. The majority of Hanafi jurists have preferred this view and have declared the difference of horizon between east and west as irrelevant. Consider the sighting of one place to be reliable for another. Durrul Mukhtar, Fatawa Rashidiyya, Fatawa Darul Deoband, Imdadul Fatawa, Kifayat al-Mufti, etc. In order to save dispute and confusion, there will be no problem in collectively resolving to adopt the sighting of one particular place. If the sighting of the moon in Saudi Arabia is declared on the 29th and is backed by testimony shahada, it will be acceptable, otherwise not. So there we go. So we find that this is what they did. And after that, so what they did is that when this dispute happened amongst themselves, with regards to what happened with Morocco, they sent their questions to their muftis, many of them, I've just mentioned 2 here, and they sent them and they asked muftis with great caliber that what should be done. These muftis gave a fatwa that the differences that you're having, everybody should follow Saudi Arabia, and by Saudi Arabia, unity can be once again established amongst the Deobandis. Is that clear? So this is what happened next. The second Mufti's name is Ahmad Khanpuri. He visits the UK very commonly. Then after that, the meeting of Hizbul Ulama in UK. After receiving these replies from all these hundreds of Muftis, from the honored Muftis, a meeting was hosted by Hizbul Ulama at Blackburn on the 23rd of November 1986, in which a great number of ulama and Muslim societies participated. In this meeting, the question and responses were read out. After an expression of satisfaction by those present, it was then resolved that in order to uproot the differences that were created between our fellow brethren of the same sect, meaning the Deobandis, regarding the moon issue, which resulted in disputes arising in every home and masjid, adopting a unanimous agreement must be discussed with the senior members of Jamiatul Ulama Britain in the light of Sharia and the council of the honored Muftis. a delegation was deputed to meet with the senior members of Jamiatul Ulama Britain, and a meeting was convened between members of the working committees of both organizations at Darul Uloom Bury on the 28th of December 1986, in which the fatwa were presented. Views were exchanged regarding the developments on this issue to date, and after lengthy deliberations, it was resolved that although there was more precaution in adopting the sighting of Morocco, but due to the difficulties experienced with Morocco, the sighting of Saudi Arabia will now be adopted in accordance to the counsel received from the Honorable Muftis. The unanimous resolution adopted is mentioned here under. So they had this discussion in Darul Uloom Bury, where I memorized the Quran. When I was young, I actually stayed there for 2 years. It's a boarding school, it's in Ramsbottom on a mountain, and that's where they had the meeting. And all these scholars met and they discussed Morocco. So it's not that Morocco was never discussed. As some people say, some of the Deobandis are just biased towards Saudi Arabia. They discussed Morocco in that meeting, and I came to an agreement that it's better that we all adopt Saudi Arabia and we follow Saudi Arabia to whatever reasons they agreed with. Then the unanimous resolve by Hizbul Ulama UK and Jamiatul Ulama Britain to adopt the sighting of the moon by Saudi Arabia. And this is what they signed and what they agreed on. They discussed and they presented their fatwa of their muftis, and they said that all our muftis have concurred and all of them are in agreement that Saudi Arabia can be followed. So today, Sunday the 28th of December 1986, a meeting was convened after Maghrib Salah at Darul Uloom Bury between senior responsible ulama of both Hizbul Ulama UK and Jamiatul Ulama Britain, under the noble supervision of Hazrat Maulana Yusuf Mutala and Maulana Musa Karmadi. After lengthy deliberations on all the perspectives of Sharia, it was resolved in this meeting that in an instance wherein the moon cannot be sighted, news of any sighting will be formally requested from Saudi Arabia, by which sighting of the moon will be declared for Ramadan, the 2 Eids and other months as well. The unanimous resolution was authorized by the following ulama of both organizations. And all the list of all the ulamas from Preston, Bolton, Blackburn, Dewsbury, Nuneaton, Leicester, Sheffield, Bury, Glasgow, Bradford were mentioned. They are scholars. After this resolution, a central moon sighting committee was formed, and after appointing 4 members from each organization, it was decided that the Jamiatul Ulama will take the responsibility of communicating with the responsible ulama of Saudi Arabia on a monthly basis regarding the sighting of the moon, and the Hizbul Ulama UK will take the responsibility of forwarding this information to the Muslim organizations by way of a pamphlet. Alhamdulillah, this system is still in practice to this day. So this is what happened, and this is what was said with regards to the meeting. So since 1986 till 2020, the agreement between the Deobandi organizations, Hizbul Ulama and Jamiatul Ulama Britain, still stands. Tayyib. And as you can see here, the signatures of all those that are present, you can see the signatures. It's written here in Urdu. Okay, you can see that these are all the signatures of the 2 organizations with regards to Jamiatul Hizbul. This is the Hizbul Ulama, and the other side is Jamiatul Ulama of Britain. On both sides, 4 members were appointed. Yusuf Mutala, as you can see, who was the principal of Darul Uloom Bury, all of them attended, and a unanimous agreement was signed between the Deobandis of both bodies, the 2 main bodies for moon sighting, in the UK, the oldest two organizations, that they both came to an agreement with 4 members on each side by forming a third committee for moon sighting, in which one would take the responsibility of communicating with the Saudi ulama, and the other organization, meaning Hizbul Ulama, and would take the responsibility of spreading the news amongst their masajid and their organizations. So this is what happened. With regards to, as we can see, the signatures, this is the history of what actually happened in the UK. There is some fools or idiots with regards to amongst the Deobandis, who at that time, not only today, but even at that time, was spreading lies that Saudi Arabia follows astronomical calculations. So this book, which has been published by the Deobandis, they themselves research their own independent. So this research, which I'm going to read to you, is a Deobandi independent research by the Hizbul Ulama. So the Hizbul Ulama, they said, the question that remains is whether the sighting of the moon is declared in accordance to the correct Sharia method or by calculations of the observatory. In Saudi Arabia, is the sighting of the moon declared by calculations of the observatory or by testimony according to the Sharia? He said, with some calculations on this issue, my humble opinion is that, Allah willing, any lingering doubts will be overcome. He says, a certain Maulana, a Deobandi Maulana, and his name is Yaqub Qasmi, he's the first one to raise this doubt. I remember being 9 or 10 years old, and in the masjid where I used to pray, Masjid Falah, I can still remember this. I saw responses that were posted on our masjid wall at the back, from Sheikh Muhammad al-Subayn, from Makkah, the Sheikh of Sheikh Wasiullah, who responded back to Maulana Yaqub Qasmi and told him that, look, you got to stop this propaganda, you got to stop this lie about our country. We don't follow astronomical calculations. We are the ones who stand with Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah at its utmost degree, and Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah has written a whole book refuting astronomical calculations. And Ibn Taymiyyah has a great status in Saudi Arabia for his defense of the Sunnah and for his refutation for bid'ah. A certain Maulana raised some doubts pertaining to the sighting of the moon in Saudi Arabia, upon which an 8-page clarification prepared by 32 responsible ulama of Saudi Arabia was sent in response. I'm trying to obtain this response, inshallah, and when I visit England, I will visit the Hizbul Ulama and I will get this response from them. The gist of this response is that those who say that the declaration of the sighting of the moon in Saudi Arabia is done in accordance to the calculations of the Weather Bureau are laying grave accusations based on absolute lies, and the curse of Allah is on such people who seek to unnecessarily give the Saudi government a bad name. In Saudi Arabia, there is no consideration given to the calculations of the observatory. Rather, only physical sighting of the moon is recognized, and the declaration of the sighting of the moon is only announced and adopted after a testimony is taken in accordance to the Sharia. Moon sighting committees have been formed throughout Saudi Arabia, in which responsible religious-minded persons have been included. However, the calendar of the whole year published by al-Qura University, prepared in accordance to the calculations of the observatory, is only used for day-to-day government affairs and not for the stipulation of acts of worship. The determining of Islamic dates is based on the sighting of the moon. The reason why we regard it incorrect in practice on the calculations of the observatory is because it is in contrast to the noble ahadith and consensus of our pious predecessors. In the hadith of Abdullah ibn Umar and that. Then that which was mentioned is the letter of Abbas Nadwi, Dr. Abdullah Abbas Nadwi, who has passed away now, at Deobandi. This is what he said. When they wrote to him When these guys wrote to the muftis in India, the muftis in India contacted Abdullah Abbas Nadwi, who was teaching Arabic at that time at al-Qura University. He said, in the kingdom of Saudi Arabia, the sighting of the moon is declared on the basis of a testimony taken by the people who sight the moon. The testimony is only accepted from those who are personally known by the Qadi, a Muslim judge, to be reliable, or their being reliable is testified by such persons whom the Qadi knows to be trustworthy. The person who testifies that the one who saw the moon is a reliable person is known as a muzakki. Thus, in the courts, a muzakki is also at hand with the one testifying to have sighted the moon. So not only do you have to have somebody who sighted the moon, but the Qadi should know him, and there should be somebody who should testify to his character, who the Qadi knows. As well as is well known to all, in Sharia, testimony is accepted from two males. In Saudi Arabia, there are two muzakkis present with two such witnesses bearing testimony. Regarding the sighting of the moon, more attention is accorded to the sighting pertaining to Ramadan, Eid and the months of Hajj. In most cases, rather than only two witnesses, a whole group of people testify before a Qadi. The statement of the reliable persons from among them are noted down, and most of them are cross-examined. Their testimony is then presented to the Chief Justice. Upon his certification, it is then presented to the king, and only after the king approves this testimony is the announcement then made. This is the reason why in these particular months, the announcement is never made immediately after Maghrib Salah, but it is only declared hours later as to whether the sighting has been established or not. So this is a testimony from a Deobandi who lived in Saudi Arabia on how the moon sighting procedures happen in Saudi Arabia. And he wrote back to them and said to them that, look, I work in al-Qura, I'm aware of al-Qura observatory, but the Saudi ulama do not follow astronomical calculations. Now, we come to the issue of sighting of the moon in Saudi Arabia is not based on the observatory calculations, astronomical calculations. Regarding the sighting of the moon in Saudi Arabia, some people from Britain, without duly investigating or seeking a proper clarification, had attempted to spread the misunderstanding that the ulama of Saudi Arabia had resolved to adopt the calculations of the observatory. In order to clarify the matter, the Secretary of the Central Moon Sighting Committee UK, Maulana Yaqub Miftahi, wrote a letter to the Ministry of Endowments, Saudi Arabia, Wizaratul Awqaf. A summary of the response is as follows. To Maulana Yaqub Miftahi Sahib, Secretary of the Central Moon Sighting Committee UK. After praises to Allah and salutations upon Rasulullah, we acknowledge the receipt of your letter, in which you seek to establish what was resolved in a meeting held by senior ulama of Saudi Arabia regarding the sighting of the moon, the Kibar ulama. Whether it has been declared to be necessary that it is sighted by the naked eye, or if establishing the sighting of the moon from the observatory will suffice. The resolution passed at the meeting of this ulama are as follows. Such observatories which do not have any restrictions according to the Sharia should be constructed that will assist in the searching of the moon. Only a sighting observed by the naked eye will be accepted, and not that of an astronomy observatory. The genuine sighting of the moon by telescope from any observatory will be acceptable, even though it is not sighted by the naked eye, since the ayah of the Quran and the Hadith pertaining to the sighting of the moon are general and encompass the sighting by the naked eye as well as the sighting by observatory instruments. The ayah of the Quran, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ لَا تَصُومُوا حَتَّى وَلَا تُفْطِرُوا حَتَّى تَرَوْا فَإِنْ غُمَّ عَلَيْكُمْ فَأَكْمِلُوا عِدَّةَ 30 يَوْمٍ. Do not begin the month of Ramadan until you see the moon, and do not end the month of fasting until you see the moon. And if the moon is obscured from your view, then complete the count of 30 days for the month. صُومُوا لِرُؤْيَتِي وَأَفْطِرُوا لِرُؤْيَتِي. Now Number 4, on the night in which it is hoped the moon will be sighted, an attempt should be made to sight it with the aid of observatory instruments, regardless of whether or not it is possible to sight the moon according to astronomical calculations. Observatories should be constructed in all 4 corners of the country, and they should be fully equipped with the appropriate instruments. Assistance should be sought from the experts of the field of astronomy. Observatories should be constructed at all other places from where the moon can possibly be sighted, and assistance should be sought from those whose eyesight is generally sharper than others, due to which they tend to spot the moon quicker than others. This meeting of the senior ulama was convened in Sha'ban 1394 after Hijrah. Remember when we went through the fatwa, that's the same meeting of the Kibar ulama which the Shaykh is talking about. And the above mentioned resolutions were passed unanimously on conditions that the sighting of the moon, whether by the naked eye or with the assistance of observatory instruments, is observed by such persons whose testimony is acceptable in the court of the Qadi, Islamic judge, and that the beginning or end of the month is not determined by astronomy-based calculations. We reiterate that the observatory instruments will only be used for assistance in the sighting of the moon and will not be used to derive calculations. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shaykh Alawi bin Idris Kayyan, Deputy Minister for Hajj and Endowments, Riyadh, 2nd of Jamad al-Thani, 1409 after Hijrah, 8th of January 1989. So that should show, Alhamdulillah, that these Deobandis, they wrote to the ulama in Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi ulama said that telescopes can be used as long as it is seen with the naked eye. So we went through this when we studied the issue. Can you remember? When we studied the issue, we went through this. Now, that it has to be, that's why the Shaykh said, what did he say at the end of the fatwa? Listen very carefully so you don't get mixed up. He said, reiterate that the observatory instruments will only be used for assistance in the sighting of the moon and will not be used to derive calculations. Tayyib? Is that clear? So they will be used to assist the naked eye, but they will not be used to derive any form of Islamic rulings. But it has to be seen with the naked eye. So that means you can't record it and see it. It has to be seen with the naked eye live. Is that clear? So you can't leave an instrument and say, khalas, let the instrument record or something, like you have today. It has to be done at that time when the crescent is out, the telescope is there or the binoculars are there, and the naked eye is the one that catches the sighting of the crescent or the new moon, but through the telescope or the binoculars. Is that clear? So from this we understand that the propaganda that is done now in the UK by the Deobandis, it is done based upon a hidden agenda to defame Saudi Arabia, based upon lies, fabrications, animosity, and evilness. And they have no evidence for this. The Deobandis instill doubts in the hearts of the Muslims with regards to Saudi Arabia on 2 things. The crescent and the new moon, and the meat that is imported to Saudi Arabia from places like Brazil, that the meat is haram and is not sacrificed according to the Islamic way. Are you with me? So from this, Alhamdulillah, today we have understood the history of the moon sighting issue in the UK. We have come to know with regards to their committees. We've come to know with regards to their disputes. We've come to know what actually happened, how everything started and where everything is. And we know that now all those who are against Saudi Arabia have gone against their own pact, which they signed in 1986, agreeing if they cannot sight the moon themselves in the UK, then if the khabar comes from Saudi Arabia, before of any other place, they will accept the khabar and the testimony of Saudi Arabia. Is that clear? Is everybody clear, Alhamdulillah, who resides in the UK, of the Deobandi fiasco with regards to the moon sighting issue? Maybe this will not be discussed again in my lessons, I don't know when, until we do separate research to refute the Deobandis in the near future, which is required. It is quite sad to see that the graduates at the Islamic University of Medina, many of them, or most of them, illa man rahimahullah, are ignorant of these issues. And they have done nothing to defend the honor and respect of Saudi Arabia. Last year on our social media, Alhamdulillah, we defended Saudi Arabia by putting pictures, and when the Deobandi started to spread the propaganda about Saudi Arabia resorting to astronomical calculations, Alhamdulillah, I put the names of those who had witnessed the moon, the crescent, the new moon, on our social media to defend the people of the Sunnah and to refute the lies of these people. The next issue, before we move on to the article of one of the Deobandis from Croydon that has written, which is the 20th issue. And this question has been asked by many. As you all know, that my opinion with regards to moon sighting is that I say and go by the opinion of the Imams of Hadith and the madhab of Ahlul Hadith, like Bukhari and Muslim, Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, and Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, that local moon sighting is the most correct opinion. All of you know of this. Yes, this is my opinion. And this is what I say to my students after teaching them, that this is the correct position. And this position is in accordance to al-manqul wal-ma'qul, according to the textual evidences and logic as well. Now the issue remains is that when I am in England and when there is a dispute amongst the people of what day the first of Ramadan will be and what day will Ramadan end and the following day will be Eid. So I come to England like I did last year, and I've been on this madhab of local moon sighting. Then what do I do? Do I follow, because England is not a Muslim country. There is no judiciary system. We don't have a Muslim ruler. We don't have a qadi who gives a judgment. So everybody is doing everything independently. It is for this reason that we have 2 or 3 or 4 Eids every single year. Is that clear? So what's the correct understanding or position as a Muslim body we should take in such a country? So we have within ourselves those who will favor international moon sighting and those who will favor local moon sighting. And there may be a split. With regards to this situation, I consulted the people of knowledge many years ago, and I said to them, someone like myself who adheres to the local moon sighting, that means for me that if I was to be put in charge and if I had any form of authority, I would say to the people that if the moon has not been sighted in England, then فَقْدِرُوا or فَقْدُرُوا لَهُ, talk 30 days. And we will not follow Saudi Arabia. Is that clear? That's if I was somebody who was put in authority, which I'm not. So I'm not, when I mean authority, I mean if I had my own masjid, or if I had a position within, a permanent position within the Muslim community, and I lived in England, and I don't live in England, because I live in Medina, but I come to England as a visitor. Are you clear what I mean by authority? So in this circumstance, the people of knowledge have said, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. But hold on to the rope of Allah and do not be disunited. That means that when you come to England, we will see, first of all, we will see that in the whole of England, Ahl al-Sunnati wal-Jama'ah, those who adhere to the book of Allah, to the Sunnah of Rasulullah, according to the understanding of the Salaf, they are not indulged in any form of apparent shirk or bid'ah. That what is their unanimous agreement? So let's say that their unanimous agreement is international moon sighting. So when we are in England, although we say that local moon sighting is the correct position, but we will not break away from the Muslim body, and we will start to fast with them, and we'll stop to cease fasting with them and celebrate Eid with them, and we will not split the Muslim body. If they are divided, local and international, head to head, that's also a possibility. We will look within our vicinity, within our province, or where we are. Whatever the majority of the people of Sunnah decide, we will go by them. Even if they are divided within the province and the vicinity, then we will look into our city. We will see that most of the masajid and organizations and Muslims who claim to be following the Sunnah, what position they are following, and by this we will go by the majority to keep the Muslim unity intact and not to spread disunity and split amongst the Muslim Ummah. Is that clear? So do we understand how we implement our position? And those of us who are not able to weigh up or to make a final decision, then they will turn back to the people of knowledge and contact the people of knowledge and say to the people of knowledge, what should we do under this circumstance? But the fact is that most of the people in the UK, of those who claim to follow the Kitab and the Sunnah, apparently they all follow international moon sighting. Am I wrong or right to say that? Mainly everybody follows Saudi Arabia. So the issue is clear, that we will not break away from the Muslims, and this is fiqh. This is how you understand fiqh. The fiqh of the hadith is such that you have sometimes a position, but that position is, and we find many examples of this in the Sunnah and in the athar of the Sahaba. We find many examples of this in the athar of the Sahaba, that they would give fatwa based upon a particular position held by their leader, and then when the leader was removed, they would go back and give fatwa to what they saw for, what they saw to be more correct. But they would not go against their leader by creating disunity amongst the Muslim Ummah. So the Ahlul Sunnah always try to keep the body of the Muslims as one. And Ahlul Bidah, as we have seen, the Ubandis, they always try to split, and the Barelvis, the Muslim Ummah, and put them in a state of chaos and split them for their worldly pleasures and for their status and for the kursi, for leadership. It is for this reason that you will see that the Barelvis, for over 50 to 60 years, 70 years in England, have never ever been ahead in the calendar. They have always been behind Saudi Arabia. There's never been a day where they have had 29 days and Saudi Arabia has 30 days, and then they have gone ahead of the calendar, and the Saudis, or those who do international moon sighting, the Deobandis as well as us, have fallen behind. Because why? Because they always really want to follow Pakistan. That's the real story behind it. We will only do local moon sighting if that is the opinion adopted by the majority of the people of Sunnah of where we reside. Although we say that everybody should do local moon sighting, if they came and consulted us, this is what we would go by. But because we are not in that position and we're not people of authority. So now with regards to what you should do, whatever position that you adopt, I hope that my argument has been persuasive. I don't compel my students to blindly follow me. Always remember this. I always say to my students that when you adopt an opinion which is in accordance to my opinion, let it be upon knowledge, ilm and basira. Let it be upon tahqiq and bahth, not based upon taqleed and blindly follow. So I don't have no issues when somebody does not follow my position, or if I find out, that will not upset me, but rather that will make me happy that at least the student doesn't blindly follow me. But Alhamdulillah, if that student does take that opinion, then we will debate and discuss until one will be able to persuade the other based upon proofs and evidences. Am I clear on that issue? Now we have this Deobandi who wrote this, the history of the UK following the Saudi Arabia moon sighting decision, by a man by the name of Muhammad Yusuf Danka. Muhammad Yusuf Danka, it sounds like a Gujarati name, Danka, and he's written an article from Croydon Masjid mentioning quite a few points. So I'm going to look at some of his statements and then I'm going to make some comments to show you how foolish and how much of a devil and a liar this man is. He says, in 1972, the intention was made to change the Sharia sighting criteria for the new moon. Alhamdulillah, for 1400 years, from the time of the Prophet, the entire Ummah was using the means of sighting the crescent moon to regulate the months of the year. In 1972, the Saudi government sent an invitation to the different regions of the Muslim world for the senior scholars to attend a conference. In this conference, without a specific agenda being outlined, the Saudi government opened the discussion on the matter of the entire Muslim world following the announcement of Saudi for a united day for Ramadan and the two Eids. For this, the Saudi government would be responsible to formulate whatever systems and procedures were required to ensure this could be fulfilled. Together with this, it was recommended that the new month announcement be relied upon the birth of the new moon, al-Qamar al-Jadid, like he says. He doesn't even know Arabic. It's not called al-Qamar al-Jadid, it's called Hilal. Rather than, you should learn the Arabic language from the Salafis. Rather than the sighting of the crescent moon, this would allow the Saudi government to announce the new moon before it was possible to be sighted anywhere in the world. Tuhfatul Ma'i Shar al-Tirmidhi, volume 1, page 56. So, this is what this guy said. Are you following me? This Yusuf Danka has looked at this. Now I'm just going to briefly look at this to show you how much of a liar this man is. So the brief response is that this is a lie, and the Deobandis are known for their lies and fabrications. If they can fabricate an ayah of the Quran, and if they can fabricate a hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then it is not far-fetched that they will lie. Now he's talking about this meeting that happened in 1972. Now the minister recently mentioned to Maulana Yaqub Miftahi that a meeting did take place of Hayth Kibar Ulama of Saudi Arabia, but nobody was invited to this meeting. So this was a meeting that happened in 1972 for the scholars of Saudi Arabia only. Even in his letter to Yaqub Miftahi, the minister, Sheikh Idris, not mentioned that your scholars were invited by the Saudi ulama to be present at this meeting. So this guy is a liar. We say to you, Ya Yusuf Danki, Mr. Danki, if you are truthful in what you say, then bring us those documents and bring us the evidences to show that Maulana Manzoor Nomani and Abu Hassan Ali Nadwi attended that meeting. We have documents with a printed fatwa of the meeting of the Kibar Ulama, printed in book form and published, that in 1972 a meeting did take place with regards to the sighting of the moon, the Kibar ulama met, but they were only the Kibar ulama of Saudi Arabia. No external body attended that meeting that we know of. So if they did attend, then bring us the evidences, bring us the names, and we will contact bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. If I have time, and if I go back to Riyadh, I will go and meet the Kibar ulama, and I will ask them that there is a man who says that in 1972, many of the Kibar ulama are alive, and they probably must have attended that meeting, that the Kibar ulama met, and was there any two Deobandi scholars by the name of Maulana Manzoor Nomani and Maulana Abul Hassan Ali Nadwi that were invited to that meeting. So Danka, your gains and your lies and your fabrications are clear. When we check them and cross-reference them with the reality from your sources as well as our sources, it became clear that you are a ifrit who lies and has nothing. And the evidence that you gave so nicely, Tuhfatul Ma'i, Sharh of Tirmidhi, volume 3, page 56. Don't try to make yourself look so academic, because that reference is a reference which has been written by Sayyid Palanpuri. Sayyid Palanpuri was not even present at that meeting. Sayyid Palanpuri has been refuted by the Salafis, walillahi alhamd, and from amongst them, our Shaykh, Mufti Muhammad Rais Nadwi, that slaughtered Sayyid Palanpuri, who is currently now the Mufti of Deoband. It's been almost 20 years now. Sayyid Palanpuri is yet back to respond to our Shaykh's words. Now, then he says, without a specific agenda being outlined, the Saudi government opened the discussion on the matter of the entire Muslim world following the announcement of Saudi for a united day for Ramadan and the two Eids. Tayyib. So, we remember the position, and I mentioned to you, that this is the fatwa of the Kibar ulama, the position of the council of the major scholars of Saudi Arabia. They issued their fatwa after the Senate of their members gathered and researched on this issue on the 13th of 8th, 1392 after Hijrah, corresponding to the 22nd of September, 1972, which the following points are: the different positions of the stationing of the moon in every country is a fact and is known easily by every single person, rationally as well as sensibility. No one has differed on the issue, but the difference of opinion amongst the scholars is whether local moon sighting should be followed or not. The issue of following local moon sighting or international moon sighting is from the issues analytical, which has the right for ijtihad, from amongst the scholars who go by local moon sighting and from amongst the scholars who go by international moon sighting. Every group of scholars have their evidence, and this is a valid difference of opinion. Ikhtilafun sa'i. From this, Danka is refuted and is a liar, because the Kibar ulama did not give preference either to international moon sighting nor to local moon sighting. They said, go back to your countries, go back to your localities, go back to your scholars. If they go by international, go by international. If they go by local, go by local. So this lie that you said that the Saudi wanted everybody to follow them is a lie of the 21st century. Danka, you will be responsible to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, because indeed you are kadhabun dajjal. Number 3, when the Senate conducted their research and taking into consideration of what they agreed with the theoretical and logical arguments, and 14 centuries have now passed, and we do not know of that during this period, there was a time where all the Islamic world and Muslims celebrated Eid on a single day. There you go, Danka. Rather than them endorsing everybody to celebrate Eid on Saudi Arabia, in fact, they are petitioning and challenging this. So we didn't come across the whole entire Muslim world from the time of the Khilafah of Abu Bakr and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam till this day, that ever all the Muslim countries did Eid on a second day. So Danka, what is your problem? What is, you can't understand Arabic? Are you relying upon English translations? If you don't know Arabic, contact a Salafi. He'll sit down, he'll read the Arabic to you, he'll translate the fatwa to you, so he can knock some sense into your head. Tayyib. With regards to astronomical calculations, the Senate and the Council of the senior scholars is in agreement that this is not to be considered as a valid method to start fasting and to celebrate Eid. May Allah grant us tawfiq. So there you go, Danka. Once again, it's made clear that the Kibar ulama in that meeting which you're talking about, 1972, in which you're saying few Deobandis were present, the Senate issued a fatwa, and they said that astronomical calculations, according to our research, are totally rejected. You understand? You know, as they say in the Arabic language, إِذَا لَمْ تَسْتَحْيِ فَاسْنَعْ مَا شِئْتَ. If you have no shame, then do what you will. So, it becomes clear to us. Then Danka says, what does Danka say? He says, amongst the attendees of the Saudi conference was Mufakkir al-Islam, Shaykh Abul Hasan Ali Nadwi, and Shaykh Manzoor Nomani. These two were the renowned scholars of the Islamic world at the time. Both had spent time with Hazrat Maulana Shah Muhammad Ilyas Kandahlevi in the work of Da'wah, Tabligh. So I say in response, Danka, listen to me very carefully. They were attendees of this meeting. Show us their signatures and evidence for their attendance. We shall write to the major scholars and ask them if they attended or not, as both of them were not part of the major scholars of Saudi Arabia. If they did attend, then it was as guests, not as scholars, if hypothetically speaking. So after attending the conference, they returned to Surat, Gujarat, India. Ran there, Chanuwara Masjid, India. Here a conference of the scholars of India was arranged. They explained that they were invited by the Saudi government to a conference without a stipulated agenda. They explained the desire of the Saudi government to adopt the birth of the new moon calendar, and also that all the scholars present in the conference had unanimously rejected this concept due to it being against the Sharia. Waji wa. How many scholars were there that came? The two sheikhs stated that the Saudi government nonetheless intended to initiate a great fitna ignoring the opposition of the scholars. They explained that the Saudi government will adopt this new system from the following year. Wajiwa, that's a reputation in yourself. When has this been implemented? You say 1972, in 1973, 1974, 1975. When did this happen? It's never happened. As predicted, it came to pass and remains the case to this day. This guy, I think this guy is definitely on something. So I say in response, may the curse of Allah be upon the liars. You all have the printed and published edition of the fatwa that was released after the meeting. So he's saying that this happened in 1973. This happened in 1973. And here I have the fatwa from Gujarat, from Ahmad Kanpuri, and from Ismail Badkodra, who is the Mufti of Darul Ulum Kantaria, where Menk supposedly became Mufti. So these two Muftis in 87 said that there is no problem signing and following Saudi Arabia in 1987. So are you telling me that these two Muftis are ignorant and forgot that there was a meeting in 1973 where both of them were alive, both of them were Muftis at that time? Did they forget that meeting that happened in Surat, which is only about 20 kilometers from where Ahmad Kanpuri is, and where about 50, 60 kilometers from where Antalya is? That they forgot about this meeting, that this is what Saudi Arabia was doing. And in 86, 87, after so many years, they gave a fatwa using the name Saudi Arabia. It's okay to follow Saudi Arabia, and there's no problem with them. So again, Danka, you need to do your homework properly. So if it was the case, then why would your Gujarat Muftis, who are from Surat, on November 1, 1986, forget about the meeting? Ismail Badkodrawi from Kantaria, Baruch, and Ahmad Kanpuri, February the 2nd, 1987. So Yusuf Danka, stop lying from your teeth. Saudi Arabia has created a timetable based on Greenwich New Moon calculation. So this is what he says. Danka then says, Saudi Arabia has created a timetable based on Greenwich New Moon calculations. This calendar known as the al-Qura calendar. Many a time sets the beginning of the new month one day before the sighting of the crescent moon. In reality, the 29th of this calendar could actually be the 28th. On this 28th date, Saudi accepts the false testimony of witnesses and makes an announcement of Eid or the start of Ramadan 1 or 2 days before the entire globe. The reality is the moon has not usually been sighted anywhere on the entire earth. In doing so, it starts Ramadan in Sha'ban and declares Eid in Ramadan, therefore unlawfully missing one obligatory fast. Thus anywhere where Saudi is blindly followed, a great fitna ensues. So now we demand evidence from this Deobandi Danka. Danka, can you tell us that the Deobandis have given ample of evidence when Saudi Arabia contradicted astronomical calculations? So in this book here, there's a list of the days where al-Qura said that the moon could not be sighted, and Saudi Arabia sighted the moon. And they went against astronomical calculations. A whole list from 86 to afterwards has been printed by the Deobandis themselves, who support Saudi Arabia that they don't do this. But we're asking Danka, can you please give us evidences from the committees, from the places, from the years, and who from amongst the Saudis were present when they gave these false testimonies? Otherwise, you will be declared a liar. al-Qura has been refuted by the scholars of Saudi Arabia in their speeches, on their mimbars, and in the newspapers. I have been following this every single year. Shaykh Salih al-Fawzan on his mimbar has refuted al-Qura calculations. And he said that we reject al-Qura observatory calculations and estimations. We go by the Sunnah, which is the sighting of the crescent and the new moon will be with the naked eye. Any of those who live in Saudi Arabia and read the newspapers, follow the ulama, will see. Now I'll give you some proper evidence. Yeah. For example, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen refutes al-Qura timetable in his Sharh of Riyadh al-Salihin, benefit number 100 and something, where he refutes and says that the calendar of al-Qura University observatory in al-Qura University for Fajr is early throughout the whole year, 5 minutes early, as they went themselves, him and his students, and they looked at the timing of when Fajr starts. He says that anybody who prays Fajr according to the starting time of al-Qura, their salah will be batil. Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah fatwa is clear on al-Qura observatory. طيب. We'll take one more issue. So Danka continues to say, in 1984 there was an international conference held in London Central Masjid and Cultural Centre, Regent Parks, for the purpose of discussing the moon sighting criteria of the UK. The agreed criteria was then sent to the Grand Mufti of India, Hazrat Mufti Abdul Rahim Lajpuri, and the acceptance and confirmation of the criteria of 1984 is mentioned in the book Fatawa Rahimiyya by Hazrat Mufti Abdul Rahim Lajpuri. Dr. Dubayan is my close friend, and he has taken ijazah from me in Hadith and read to me. So I will further investigate this issue with him, what happened. But this lie about the Grand Mufti, there is no Grand Mufti of the India. We don't acknowledge Abdul Rahim Lajpuri to be Grand Mufti of India. So stop lying to the people that he's the Grand Mufti of India. Abdul Rahim Lajpuri has been refuted by Al-Allama Abdul Jalil As-Samrodi, rahimahullah ta'ala. They were contemporaries, and all their life they refuted. Shaykh Abdul Jalil As-Samrodi rahimahullah even wrote a book called Al-Insaf Fima Anna Raddahu Al-Lajpuri Raddan Limadhab Al-Ahnaf. That the justice that Abdul Rahim Lajpuri has refuted himself, by refuting me, has refuted himself and the madhab of the Hanafis. Shaykh Abdul Jalil Samrodi rahmatullah alayhi wrote this risala. Till he was alive, Abdul Rahim Lajpuri, he could not respond back to that risala. So Abdul Rahim Lajpuri is not even the Grand Mufti of the Deobandis. Even the Deobandis don't accept him to be the Grand Mufti. Maybe because he's Gujarati, Danka, and you're Gujarati, Danka, and he's in DJ, he's Deobandi, and DG, like we say, Deobandi Gujarati. You like to always push this Gujarati Deobandi thing, which we have been seeing a lot in the UK, that this racism Gujarati Deobandis have towards others, towards the Pakistanis, is something which is well experienced and well known amongst the Deobandis. Speak to them and they will tell you about it. جزاكم الله خيرا وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. So if I raise my voice, it's only because for the love of this country, the country where we find Alhamdulillah that the Sunnah can be practiced, that a person who practices the Sunnah in this country is respected and honored. And you will not find this respect and honor anywhere on the face of this earth, for indeed I swear by Allah, but you will find it in any corner of Saudi Arabia. Anywhere you go in Saudi Arabia, a man of the Sunnah, even the police will respect a person who follows his deen. They will see and speak to him differently, just because of his steadfastness upon the deen. Now, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wa akhiru da'wana anil hamdulillahi rabbil alamin.